You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. For previous episodes, visit thinkingcountry.com or find the podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud by searching for Meet the Farmers. Hello and welcome to episode 49 of Meet the Farmers, which is being supported by the Mercer Foundation. It's stop 2 on the podcast road trip around the Cotswolds. I'll also be heading to Worcestershire, Herefordshire, North Wales, and I've come to Conagry Farm in Gloucestershire to meet Jonty Brunyee. Conagry is a 180-acre mixed farm in the heart of the Cotswolds. It's part of the National Trust's Sherborne Park estate and the historic landscape of Lodge Park. Jonty and his wife Mel keep Cotswold sheep and Hereford cattle, as well as Gloucester Old Spot pigs, and there are lots of other ventures happening as well, which we're going to talk about. They produce lamb, hoggets, mutton, beef and pork, as well as focusing on conservation and improving the state of the farm's natural environment. They're registered with Organic Farmers and Growers and assured by the Pasture Fed Livestock Association, which you might remember we talked about in episode 44 with Silas Headley-Lawrence. Jonty, thank you so much for having me. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but I thought, could you start just by providing some context and telling me about the farm and how you first came here?
Sure. So go back to the beginning. I'm a farmer's son from Nottinghamshire. Grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I remember Dad and my second eldest brother ripping out hedgerows, spraying from the air, destroying or knocking down traditional buildings which couldn't fit the tractors in anymore, pulling out old ancient trees. And for me, that wasn't right. I felt that at a young age when I was at school, even though I was passionate about farming and loved growing up on a working farm, there was something not right. So when I was at school and wondering what to do as a career, I knew I wanted something farming, food-wise, but my passion was the environment. So my degree at Sealhain College, or it ended up being Plymouth University by the time I'd finished, was Rural Resource Management, my first degree, which was 1989-93, and it was one of the first multidisciplinary degrees, I think, that really tried to cover a little bit of everything: food, forestry, access, recreation, tourism, environmental goods, clean air, fresh water, etc. A proper multidisciplinary degree, maybe focused on public goods. I can't remember if we even called it that in those days. But that was my passion, trying to get the best out of our land and trying to balance our outputs and outcomes and being holistic in the way that we manage our farms. From there, I ended up being a FWAG advisor in Lincolnshire for a few years, and then worked for the National Park, Peak District National Park, managing a few projects in the hills. Ended up working as an agricultural advisor for the National Trust, doing whole farm plans and agri-environment scheme applications. And I was driving down this road, the Foss Way, one day, and I saw a little sign, farm to rent, with a little National Trust oak leaf on it. I thought, well, I'll follow that, I'll go and see what's going off. And I pulled into the drive here at Conagry Farm, and it was open day, and there was about 100 farmers and people here looking at the farm, all interested in tendering for it and going for it. And I just pulled in, and I got out the car, and something hit me about this place. I don't know if it was the peace or the landscape, the tranquility, the bird song. Something about it, something about the sense of place hit me right between the eyes. I thought, I want to live here. I want to farm this farm. Why am I advising and working for others or working with other farmers when I could be doing it myself and practicing what I preach? So I plucked up courage. I spoke to my partner at the time and we put our money together and we did a business plan. We applied for the farm. This was 2003, 2004. Foot and Mouth had just finished, of course, and BSE was still happening, and farming wasn't potentially in a great place. So there were opportunities, and we saw that. The best time to get into any industry is when it's on its knees or when it's at the bottom, and hopefully there's growth afterwards. So we had tendered for the farm. My passion being environment and a bit of marketing and adding value as well as producing food played into my favour, and it worked out. We were offered the farm, and we moved here in 2004. 180 acres. The farm hadn't been farmed that well in the past. It had been farmed hard and then let go a little bit. Most of it was in ex-set-aside or long-term set-aside. There were thistles everywhere and ragwort everywhere, and all the field boundaries were fallen down and the buildings were a mess. But it was a great wildlife habitat for that reason. The goldfinches and the corn bunting were everywhere. So my job when we came, 2004, 2005, was just to consolidate a little bit. Get some fencing back up, get some livestock back on the farm, get to know the place, get to know the soil, work out which weeds we had to tackle and which we could leave alone, leaving space for nature, build a relationship with the National Trust. And that's what I did for the first few years. Introduced Cotswold sheep first, still a little bit of arable on the farm, we still had some barley and wheat in rotation, and then eventually put it all down to grass. We have herb-rich lays on the farm, particularly chicory and sandfoin-based herb-rich lays. But the majority of the farm is species-rich limestone grassland, trying to revert it from that ex-arable state. 14, 15 years in, it's now looking pretty good. We've got about 120 different species of herb, grass, wildflower on the farm. Call it the Conigry salad bar to feed our animals. Cattle are crucial. We started with sheep, we got the fencing up. I was always busy doing other things, other jobs, because it was let as a part-time farm, which is quite important.
Okay.
The National Trust didn't want anybody pushing it too hard. You could just about make a full-time living from this place, but it suits it best. Poor Grade 3 land as a gentle part-time farm, extensive stocking, etc. We introduced traditional Hereford cattle about 6-7 years ago now, and that has really helped the grazing, the soil organic matter, and the species diversity in the meadows. So we feel we're getting there. It's early days still. I've been here 14, 15 years, it's early days. I was very lucky that Mel, my wife, she joined me nearly about 9 years ago now. We got married. She was the grazing manager for Norfolk Wildlife Trust, so she brought some extra skills with her about grazing and animal welfare and handling animals, etc., which she'd done an awful lot with. So that's really pushed us on to where we are today. So we've got about 50 Cotswold sheep, which is one of the biggest flocks in the world. Crazy. Got about 12 suckler cows, traditional Herefords. We have about 6 to 10 traditional breed pigs at any one time, weaners, usually old spots. We've got about 6 horses on livery, DIY livery, and we've got 1 or 2 other new ventures starting.
Yeah, we've definitely got to that later. But talk me through the tender process with the National Trust, because clearly it was quite competitive at the time.
Sure. I think the first thing when any farm tender, and it was very apparent to me, is got to be honest with yourself, understand what your own passion is. What's your strength? What do you really want to do? I know a lot of young farmers who say they want to farm, and because that's what they have grown up with and they think that's what their passion is, but actually dig a bit deeper. What makes you tick? What's your passion? So that's always the starting point, and that was the starting point for me. Did I really want this? Did I want to grow food? Is this about growing lots of tons of wheat and big Charolais cattle? No. This goes back to my heart, which is public goods, holistic management, land management. Yes, producing food of high quality and premium, but producing all those other things and getting that balance. I've managed not to say the word sustainable yet, which I'm quite proud of, because I hate the word, and that might be my 1 minute soapbox thing, I'm not sure yet. But yes, I want to be sustainable, holistic, agroecological principles, and regenerative, which is key.
Where does that, without backtracking too much, where do you think that comes from?
The regenerative stuff.
Was there someone who influenced you early in life, or someone you met along the way, or is it deeper than that?
I think there's 2. There's push factors. So it's that growing up with a family farm thing, and seeing things not right, not feeling comfortable about intensive agriculture when I was younger. The pull factors, I'm going to blame 2 people. Number 1, Jonathan Porritt. He was the leader of the Green Party when I was sort of 16, 17, and I read a book called Seeing Green. And that was about basic environmental economics and environmental policies and green politics and things about public goods, natural capital. That's when it really switched it on for me for the first time, at environmental accounting and triple bottom line type stuff. So that's what really got me into environmental policies and campaigning and that sort of wider thing. That led me to FWAG and my first proper job as an advisor. And the advisor I worked alongside, a very experienced farm conservation advisor called Roger Wardle in Lincolnshire. And he was, and he still is, one of those passionate farmers that practices what he preaches and, yes, likes tractors and cattle and pigs and growing stuff, but gets really excited when he spots an orchid, really excited when he finds some corn bunting habitat. And that's what turned him on. And that rubbed off on me when I was 24, 25, that passion for farming and conservation. So I put those two people as the people that sort of pulled me and really sort of inspired me in sort of those early years. There are others as I've gone through, people like Joel Salatin, etc., and Wendell Berry, and some of the classics that a lot of us relate to. And on my Nuffield travels, which maybe we'll talk about, one or two there as well. You mentioned, we started talking about the business, the tendering process. Sorry, I've rambled on now. So it's about getting to know yourself first, being honest with you, who you are, what your passion is. Then it's about doing the numbers, and of course it's got to be viable. So you've got to be honest with the numbers, work out where your market is, what you're going to buy, making sure you do proper cash flows and working that through, making sure it links back to your aims and objectives and your own vision, and putting it in a compelling way in a business plan. Because at the end of the day, a tender is competitive. And you've got to stand out, and you've got to add a little bit of something, a bit of passion, a bit of character. You've got to show off a little bit to grab the reader's attention or the land agent's or the letting agent's attention. Another little tip is, if you are tendering from a farm, as soon as you walk onto that farm at viewing day, you're being interviewed. First impressions count. Get to know people, shake hands, be confident, ask the right questions, dig a little bit. That one-to-one, that personal touch is important. Pull your business plan together, get someone who knows stuff to check it over because you would have missed things, and go for it. You might be lucky, you might get an interview, you might not. You might make 10 applications and never get an interview. But if you are lucky enough to get an interview, if your business plan fits, then making sure you've got a bit of interview experience is crucial. Just being able to relax, to be honest, to chat, to be able to explain your ideas, to show your passion, and to show that you've got the practical skills. Let's not forget that. You could have a great idea and have a bit of money behind you, but unless you've got that experience that you can show that you've done stuff before, that means a lot, and that weighs a lot, of course, when people are looking to choose you for a farm. And I think there's going to be lots of opportunities in the future. Again, we've not said Brexit yet, but there's going to be lots of change. Whatever happens in the next
30 minutes in.
Oh yes,
quite well to keep that long.
There's going to be lots of opportunities, and lots of young farmers and new people to the industry. I think it's an exciting time.
In terms of the stock that you have, why was it important to you to choose more traditional breeds?
Good question. Rare breeds are rare breeds for a reason. So why have we got rare breeds? Cotswold sheep, let's start there. I love Cotswold sheep. Big silly animals, full of character, like big Labradors. They're not the best carcass, but they taste bloody good. Yeah. That's the key. They've got that lovely layer of fat. They effectively do live off fresh air. All our species-rich grassland has to go somewhere. They eat it and turn it into wonderful protein and very tasty meat. They're not the most prolific. They're big and heavy. They're very woolly, of course. They're a long wool breed, which they're famous for, which means they get a little bit dirty. We couldn't move to this parish of Oldsworth without having Cotswolds, because it was the last parish to have a proper flock. In the 1970s, the farm next door was selling up. The last 200 females were for sale, and that's when Joe Henson, Adam Henson's dad, bought some and lots of others, and the rare breed movement really started. So I couldn't not move to the parish and not have some Cotswolds. Yeah. When I started, I had a few Cotswolds and then a lot of Clins as well, very prolific. didn't quite suit the ground, to be honest. They were a little bit too needy for us. So interestingly, we now, over 14 years, have a very nice flock of grass-fed Cotswolds, which are pretty easy to look after and give us a very tasty lamb at the end. We occasionally cross them with a Hampshire ram to get a better carcass on the butcher's lambs.
And they retain condition pretty well through the winter? Generally,
anything that doesn't go, so we've been quite hard. So we do probably have a nice bloodline now that are very suited to rough, species-rich limestone pasture and nice and hardy. I used to lamb indoors in January with a ton of cake each and really go for it like lots of other pedigree breeders. But we're now very extensive, lamb in April, May, straight onto grass outside. Finish half of them as lamb, which we sell from the door, and the other half we take through as hogget, which we sell mostly from the door, again at a premium price.
And that's the key, isn't it? You're in full control over your price.
Absolutely. It's the only way we can survive, really, is added value in short supply chains. Trying to sell everything locally, all the beef, lamb, hogget, mutton, all sold locally, at a premium, and keeping it very simple as well.
Talk me through your stewardship schemes and what you're trying to achieve in terms of conservation on the farm.
Okay, so every acre here at Connigree is in OELS, HLS, or organic. The majority of the farm is in restoration of species-rich grassland, so that's no inputs, no fert, no sprays, very extensive grazing. We're about 0.4 livestock units per hectare. We make hay in rotation, late cut hay through most of the fields, so everything gets a chance to set seed most years. Wonderful product, it's great for you walk through and all the butterflies and moths and insects that buzz out and all the orchids and wildflowers that are reappearing. Probably my favourite thing, actually. If you ask me what my favourite thing is, it is walking into a proper wildflower meadow or pasture in a May or June day and sitting and just listening and watching and smelling and spotting new wildflowers that I've not spotted before. And then turning the cattle in and seeing them eat the bird's foot trefoil and getting excited and producing great meat. All of the species-rich grasses in HLS, and then we've got about 14 hectares of herb-rich ley, which is an HLS as well. So lots of chicory, sainfoin, clovers, etc. We let that grow up and flower. That's part of the stewardship agreement. We can graze it later in the year once it's had chance to flower, for the pollinators particularly. So that lends itself very well to mob grazing. So you've got chicory up to our head sometimes, 6 foot tall. A lot of farmers would panic with that, but we don't. We're quite happily turning cattle in, a bit of electric fencing and grazing through it. Go through it once in summer, maybe 2 or 3 times later in the year, and trampling it in. So graze a third, leave a third, trample a third in is one of our mottos on the tall grass. We've also got stewardship margins everywhere, so every field has a species-rich enhanced strip around it of wildflowers and herbs. We've got a fallow plot for lapwing. We had breeding lapwing on it this year, again in the middle of a herb-rich ley. Dry stone walls, hedging, bits of tree planting, traditional buildings, bird boxes, and 7 hectares of wild bird cover as well. That's our one bit of arable that's left in the rotation. Mm-hmm. So we've got a nice mix of things like wheat and fodder radish and buckwheat, which we leave to set seed, and we get lovely flocks of yellow hammers and chaffinch and linnet and quite a lot of corn bunting, etc. on that. So that's wonderful. And we have to feed the birds in the winter as well. So we've attracted all these birds. The wild bird cover is finished by about January, February. So we feed about 6 tons of grain on the floor to keep the birds going through the winter until the insects and until nesting season.
Let's talk about your new ventures and diversified income streams. You've very recently started a joint venture. I don't know how much we can talk about this. You started a JV with a guy who wants to start some small-scale horticulture on the farm.
I guess it's always been our aim here, or my aim for the last few years, is we've probably done as much as we can do. Sheep, cattle, pigs, selling meat direct, brilliant, all good stuff, and that's good. I'm 49, I'm 50 this year actually, so it's time to do more, and that's been a desire of mine to do more and make more of what we've got here. But we can't do it, we need to work with other people. So joint ventures, working with new growers and farmers, young farmers, whatever, is something we desperately want to do. So earlier this year, we were approached by a young lad, James, who desperately wants to grow and go into develop a no-dig organic market garden. So we've worked with him and the National Trust to draw up an agreement, and as we speak, the first polytunnel is going up. So the first seedlings will be going in a couple of weeks, hopefully, and James is taking on 2 acres from us. The joint venture is we put 10% of the labour and costs in and take 10% of the profit. So it's mainly his business, but we've got a small share. And it'll benefit us both. You know, he wants some of our muck, he wants some animals and chickens on his plot, we want some veg to sell with our meat boxes and work together on that. And we want more people on the farm, you know, some more eyes per acre, as Wendell Berry would say, and more activity and diversity. So as well as a financial gain, hopefully, there's a social gain there for us and potentially an environmental one, a bit more of a circular economy with muck and some of the waste and some of the other bits going off.
So from a business structure point of view with that JV, do you form a separate limited company? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's a separate company, Cotswold Organics, I think it's now called, which pays a rent to the farm. We both put money in and assets in, and we both draw out of that. James will take drawings and we'll take drawings as well. Yeah, so it's a separate entity in its own right.
Moving on, traditionally you've run some weddings on the site in the past.
Yes.
And you've taken the decision to expand your events side.
Yes. We've always done education visits here. It is built into our stewardship, actually. We do up to 10 educational visits a year with students. And through my work at the Royal Ag University and others, we've always brought groups here. And I love doing that. We've always said we needed an event space to maximise that. We have hand washing facilities, dry area to do a lecture in. We've also run 3 weddings, I think, and parties over the last few years for friends, and they've always gone well. We've enjoyed doing them. And we were going to look at a wedding barn, developing one of the buildings, vernacular buildings, of the National Trust. It didn't fit right, big investment into fixed assets, planning permission, etc., etc. One day, Mel and I went to the cinema. We were watching The Greatest Showman, must be about 2 years ago now. And the main character is sat in the ashes of his building. His circus has burnt down. He looks at his team and says, "We don't need a building, we just need a tent." And that's when Mel and I looked at each other in the middle of the cinema, and it hit us, straight between the eyes again. Crikey, we don't need a wedding barn. We could buy a teepee or a set of teepees or a marquee, a bit more flexible, a pop-up event space. So I went home, did research, started putting a few figures together. That was about 2 years ago. It's been tough. Setting up another business is always tough. Business planning, borrowing money. We were very lucky to get a leader grant for 40% as well. Filling out all the forms and going through that, getting all the quotes. Plucking up courage to take that risk of developing another business. That takes a mindset change, and that's something I've been quite into the last few years. How do you get from ideas stage to actually launching a new business and being enterprising and entrepreneurial? But we're getting there. So we've now bought 3 big teepees, catering tent, bar tent, chillers, toilets, all sorts of stuff. Spent about £100,000, luckily to get about 40 grand from Leader to help with that. We've launched a few weeks ago, done a few big parties, birthday parties, etc. We've got our first wedding bookings in for next year. And the idea is to offer something very bespoke, very beautiful, very relaxed, in the middle of our meadows or herbrich lays, surrounded by wildflowers. And a bride and groom could hire the space for 4 days and have basically a festival wedding. And hopefully we can sell them some meat as well and talk and introduce, link the food side. But now we've got the space. We've got a space for food events, for education events, for conferences, for meetings, yoga in meadows, whatever we want to do now. So that's the next stage. We start marketing it for next year properly. So yeah, exciting times, but we have to be more resilient. We have to expect a decrease in subsidy payments, maybe a decrease in stewardship or public subsidy for environmental stuff. So we have to be more resilient to change. So we have to be more enterprising and new income streams. So the event side is one that to be important to us. And for me, tourism, agri-tourism, rural tourism, is the final icing on the cake. We can produce food, we can produce wool, we can do the environmental stuff and do that well, but selling the experience, the experiential, getting people here to enjoy the farm is the last bit of the icing on the cake for us. And that brings it all together. And if you get it right, very profitable. But it's very tiring. Very stressful. Yeah.
Talking about some of your off-farm activities, you were involved with the Royal Agricultural University, Royal Agricultural College, for several years.
Yeah. So I've always worked off farm as well. So as I say, the farm was let as a part-time farm. I've always done about 1 to 2 days a week on the farm. My wife Mel does 1 to 2 days a week. Father-in-law does a little bit, and contractors and casual work as well. But my work off farm started with consultancy, and then 5-6 years ago I went to the Royal Ag University as a senior lecturer in farm business management, and I taught diversification and food marketing and sustainability and tourism. Tried to link it all together again, to be holistic with my teaching. Started to introduce more agroecology and regenerative type themes into my teaching, which went down well. Inspired a few people, I hope, and loved it. And I learnt a lot, and loved being at the RAU. But I've just left the RAU to come back home to develop the new enterprises, which wasn't going to happen without me coming home, which was a bit of a risk again, giving up a 9 to 5 with a pension and colleagues and training and holiday pay, etc., back to the family business. So that's been a big decision, but hopefully that'll pay off. But I've also just started another new job, which is wonderful. The new Farm Ed project at Honeydale Farm, working with Cotswolds Seeds and Ian Wilkinson there.
Yeah, give a plug for that.
Yeah.
It's just about to start.
So I start next week, 4 days a week. I'll be managing the Farm Ed project, and Farm Ed is going to be the centre for farming and food education. We're going to be a base really trying to promote regenerative agriculture, agroecology. It's a trial site. There's lots of demonstration plots and trial plots on the farm, lots of things going off. And we've just built a beautiful set of education buildings and a food building where people can come, have conferences, there'll be training events, a farm ed programme, and hopefully a really nice food offer / destination restaurant. We shall see. And it'll be a place for others as well. So again, joint ventures, some enterprise and entrepreneurship on site, and maybe a monthly food hub as well. So again, it'll be from plot to plate, holistic. Really exciting. So somehow I'll be managing the events, working on the veg plot, selling all the beef and lamb from the farm, and all the other stuff too. So we need more people on the farm. I think that's the key. Yeah. Mel and I can't do any more, so we need more joint ventures and people.
Yeah. That brings us quite well onto your Nuffield Scholarship, which was on building a sustainable farm business, which is nice and broad.
Crikey, yes.
Can you just summarise your main learning points from that time?
Yeah. The title.
And where did you travel as well?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the title is very broad, and I guess I did that on purpose. I did want to look a little bit of everything and try and bring it together. My holistic nature, I guess. I travelled to Romania, Italy, France, Belgium, America, Canada, and China, and Hong Kong. Met people spent a bit of time with Joel Salatin, Michael Abelman on Vancouver Island or Salt Spring Island, again, was someone who really inspired me, an organic grower in Vancouver Island. Gary Zimmer, the biological farmer, so we talked a lot about soil. Spent a bit of time in Romania looking at agri-tourism and looking at peasant agriculture and small-scale agriculture there, which I found really inspiring. The most wonderful wildflowers I've ever seen. All sorts. Italy looking at agroturismo stuff and all sorts of varied, from small farms, peasant farms, local food chains, right up to intensive stuff in the States. What were my findings? Number one, it starts with soil. And I think we probably all agree on that. And that really brought it home to me, and we're doing as much as we can now here on the farm about soil and that organic matter. It's where it all starts. Number two, the role of small farmers. Very often we celebrate intensification, getting bigger, efficiency. But we need to really focus sometimes on supporting small farmers and local farmers and part-time farmers like ourselves, and trying to help them. It's not all about getting bigger. Focusing on effective farming, not just efficient farming. It's not just about how much you get out of a system for how much you put in, but more about the objectives that you're trying to aim at, the outcomes that come out of your farming and land management, not just yields. So that's something quite hard to measure, but it's something that we need to keep focusing on, not all about efficiency. There's a big theme in my Nuffield about enterprise and entrepreneurship, about how we need to diversify. It's very easy to say. We need to help more people with that mindset change of being entrepreneurial and getting from ideas stage to business launch to business growth to working with others. And that's not always easy. So I think we need to do more of that. Don't just give capital grants, but actually help people through the process as well. And agroecology, a holistic, organic, ecosystem type approach is key. That was another big theme. And the true cost of food as well. Everywhere I went, it's obvious we don't pay enough for our food. The externalities are hidden in the system, and somehow we have to move to a true cost food system.
I'm going to take something from your website.
Okay.
So you talk about challenges and opportunities there, and you're right. The farming industry faces many challenges. There is a need to produce more food with fewer resources, fuel, fertiliser and water, whilst at the same time doing more for biodiversity, landscape and heritage. Farmers are also tasked with reducing their carbon footprint, providing access and educational opportunities, and producing renewable energy. Climate change, first of all.
Crikey.
And obviously with Greta Thunberg, her most recent speech at the UN, which has struck a big chord. What in your view needs to be done to reduce the carbon footprint of agriculture, but more specifically perhaps for small and medium-sized farmers with limited resources? What can they do, and what can you do in your current situation to really take a good hard look at your carbon output and put it under some sort of sustainable control?
Yeah.
Oh, I said sustainable.
No, don't.
Oh no.
It's a huge question, and obviously there's lots and lots and lots of different answers. I'll try 3 solutions. Number 1, measure stuff. Every farm should have a bit of a carbon footprint measurement, whether it's the Farm Carbon Toolkit or others. Get to know a little bit where the key issues are and start monitoring. That's the first step. It's a management step. Second step, cut down on artificial fertiliser. That's probably the biggest carbon footprint on your farm. So moving to organic maybe, or low input at least, will help that. There may be a small drop in yields, but we might have to accept that if we're going to reduce our footprint. Number 3, probably the biggest one for us and smaller farmers, is work on your soil. We need animals, pasture, organic matter into soil. Let's start to sequester as much as we can. Beef animals are not bad for the planet. It's what we throw at them that is bad for the planet. Putting fossil fuel into the system is where the climate change impacts are. Yes, cows are farting all the time, there's methane everywhere, yeah, that's fine, but that's recycled, the carbon cycle. If you get our grassland management right and locking carbon, then it could be carbon negative or carbon neutral, particularly if you start throwing in agroforestry and more trees into a system. That's probably the 3 things I would encourage all farmers to do. Monitor, reduce artificial fertiliser, and grassland management, grazing, organic matter.
And on the more food with fewer resources level, does that mean a complete change in the status quo or just an adapted change?
We'll always adapt and change, hopefully, so we just need to speed that adaptation up, maybe in slightly different ways. So where we're going to get more food from? Well, the market garden, 2 acres, the field next door to the farmhouse here, grow a lot more food on that 2 acres than I'm producing probably on the other 178. So maybe a move more to some horticulture and less agriculture, higher value crops, nutrient dense crops that we can grow in this country. And that'll come back to compost and soil management and more people and a bit more tech in places and more diversity. We can improve yields by improving our soil management. It doesn't have to have more fertiliser, more pesticides. It's about better management, better rotation, grassland back into systems. We can increase stocking levels on some of our grasslands if you manage it better through, say, mob grazing or tall grass grazing, and monitoring and control or holistic grazing. So conservation, low input, doesn't always have to mean reduced output. We can increase yields and output on some of our land. Not all of it. Some of it should go the other way and be even more extensive. I will throw the word rewilding in as well, just to stir things up.
That was going to be my next question. Where do you stand, Jonty, on rewilding?
Rewilding, love it. And that will annoy some farmers out there. I'll go again back to the 70s and 80s on the home farm. We had areas of scrub on the farm. We had a couple of fields that we'd not managed or Dad hadn't managed properly for years. And they were the best habitats on the farm, guaranteed. Occasionally there was a fire, occasionally there was some grazing, occasionally there'd be some disturbance in that ground. So it wasn't going to revert to woodland. We don't want woodland everywhere. That intermediate habitat of scrub or grazed wood pasture, so valuable, and we've lost so much of it. So I know we always quote NEP as an example. I love NEP, some wonderful work there, and it's a real inspiration to me. But I think on all farms there could be more space for nature, and that means different things on different farms. We might call it rewilding or wilding. On this farm we've got about 3 acres, a bit more than that, probably 3 hectares that we are just letting go back to scrub. And hopefully some trees will grow in that. It'll still get grazed, but that's our little bit of rewilding. It'll join 2 woodlands together as well, a bit of connection.
You can get that under new countryside stewardship.
Really, there we go. It'll all excellent. He knows the code as well. Brilliant.
Too well.
Yeah. So I don't think we need NEPs everywhere, but a nice little network of NEPs through counties, through landscapes, I think would be good. But we have to take farmers with us. I don't think we should enforce it on whole landscapes or uplands or big blocks of land without the farmer community buying into it.
And then on the opportunities front, you've got, amid these challenges, we see opportunities due to increased public appreciation of local food, traditional breeds and high animal welfare, and more support for environmental management. We believe it's a good time to be involved in farming. When did you write that? Does your opinion still stand as the same?
I probably wrote that when I updated the website about 6 years ago. Does it still stand? Yes, even more so. I think it does. Absolutely. We must do more. We must produce some more food. We must do more for nature. We must link and get closer to our markets and communities. Is it a good time to get into farming? Yes, it's always a good time. There's always opportunities out there, and there's going to be more in the future.
Brilliant. Right, 1 minute soapbox. So this gives guests 1 minute to talk about a subject of their choice, and it can be anything at all, farming or non-farming.
Okay.
Have you got an idea?
I made a mental list earlier when I was driving. It was going to be rural housing.
Right.
That we can create lots of exciting jobs in the countryside and in the Cotswolds, but where on earth do people live and where are our children going to live, because housing is so expensive? It was going to be about grass-fed and pasture-fed, and about how everyone is using the grass-fed claim, but to me it should be 100% grass-fed to use that label, and proper pasture-fed, but no, I'm not going to mention that. It was going to be RPA and all of that nonsense. I was going to mention Brexit. I might even mention badgers, but no. I'm going to come back to the deepest bit of my heart, sustainability. There, I've said the word again.
There we are.
There we go.
Comes out at the end. Yes. Okay, Jonty Brunyee, 1 minute.
1 minute.
Sustainability starting now.
I hate the word sustainability. I think it's corrupted, overused, and it's taking us backward. We all use it, don't we? I've used it. It's on our website. I've used it all the way through my career. Sustainable farming, sustainable food, sustainability ethos, blah, blah, blah. It means nothing. And I'm fed up of seeing it everywhere. And I know everybody else is fed up of seeing it everywhere too. What does it mean? It means protecting what we have today for tomorrow. But we've already destroyed most of what we've got. We've lost so much. We're still in decline. We don't need to protect what we have today. We need to rebuild. We need to regenerate. We need regenerative farming. We need to rebuild soil, rebuild habitats, improve our water and air quality, improve the linkage with our communities and customers, not just protect and conserve. We must regenerate. Down with sustainability.
That was probably one of the most impassioned 1 minute soapboxes we've had. That's fantastic. Thank you, Jonty.
Our next venture, if anyone
continues.
if anyone out there is interested, we want someone to come here and maybe set up a micro dairy, or pastured chickens or pastured pork on the farm. We haven't got time. We haven't got the energy. So yeah, if anyone's interested, get in touch. Something small, but maybe a bit of a joint venture, linking in with our existing customer base. It might be good for somebody out there.
Jonty Brunyee there on his farm in Gloucestershire. If you are interested in that opportunity or want to find out more about Jonty and Mel and what they're doing at Conagry Farm, visit their website, which is www.conagryfarm.co.uk. Next time, I'll be in Worcestershire speaking to holistic grazing and holistic management champion Rob Havard, so I hope you can join me then. In the meantime, big thanks to the Mercer Charitable Foundation for supporting this episode, to Tom Land for his help with production, and to you, of course, for listening. Please do subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, leave a comment and share it with someone. And I'll look forward to you joining me next time on Meet the Farmers.